5 secrets behind the making of The Pursuit of Happyness. Number 1. The title was purposely misspelled. The film The Pursuit of Happyness is based on the true story of entrepreneur Chris Gardner's rise from lower-class salesman to upper-class stockbroker. Gabriele Muccina directed the film, which was shot in 2006, and Steve Conrad wrote the screenplay. Many people noticed, however, that the word happiness was misspelled. The title is misspelled on purpose in the film. The misspelled phrase is actually from a 1776 essay arguing that whites and blacks were created equal. The essay, written by Lemuel Haynes, a biracial man living in New England during the Revolutionary War, quoted Thomas Jefferson's well-known sentence from the United States Declaration of Independence, but spelled the final word with a Y. The essay reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Number 2. It was based on a true story of Chris Gardner. Chris Gardner could never have imagined that his life story would be turned into a hit Hollywood film when he and his young son were sleeping rough on the floor of a public toilet. Mr. Gardner, then 27, and his toddler son were homeless in San Francisco for a year in the early 1980s. He couldn't afford to rent an apartment because he was enrolled in a low-paying trainee scheme at a stock brokerage. Mr. Gardner, who was estranged from his partner, and Chris Jr. on the other hand, would sleep wherever they could. They'd sleep in parks, at a church shelter, or under his desk at work after everyone else had gone home, in addition to the toilet at a railway station. They ate at soup kitchens, and what little money he had was spent on enrolling his son in daycare so he could work. Despite this setback, Mr. Gardner excelled at his job. A natural at selling stocks and shares, Dean Witter Reynolds promoted him to full-time employee at the end of his training period. After finally being able to rent a home for himself and his son, his career skyrocketed, and in 1987 he founded his own investment firm, Gardner Rich. Today, Mr. Gardner is worth an estimated $60 million, travels the world as a motivational speaker, and sponsors a number of homeless charities and organizations that combat violence against women. The real Chris Gardner actually made a brief cameo appearance in the film. At the end of the film, the real Chris Gardner confidently walks past Will Smith and Jaden. Take note of Will Smith's brief glance back and smile as he and his son stroll through the streets of San Francisco. Number 3. The studio behind The Pursuit of Happyness was hesitant to cast Jaden Smith as the on-screen son. Will Smith stated that there was backlash over Jaden Smith's portrayal of his on-screen child in the 2006 drama The Pursuit of Happyness. Smith recalled in his self-titled memoir, "Director Gabriele Muccina had been struggling to cast the perfect actor to play my son." He then added, "He had seen nearly 500 kids. Gabriel is an instinctual, intuitive artist. Things have to feel right for him." Will stated that Jaden, then 6 years old, expressed an interest in acting around the time of casting for The Pursuit of Happyness. As a result, Will and his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, agreed to let their son audition for the film. However, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air star said that Jaden was also not considered because of the perceived favoritism and preferential treatment. Will wrote, "The studio also felt that it would seem like nepotism, and just put us in the hole from the first announcement." He then added, "At Gabriel's pleasing, they agreed to allow him to put Jaden and me on camera as a chemistry test." He then continued, "It was such a touchy subject at the studio that Jaden and I removed ourselves from the decision-making process." He then added that there were conflicts of interest everywhere we looked. Number 4. One conversation changed Gardner's life forever. Christopher Gardner was struggling with his meager earnings as a medical salesman when he had a meeting that changed his life forever. When he noticed a well-dressed man driving up in a red Ferrari, he became curious and asked the man what he did for a living. Gardner's mind was made up, and he wanted to become a stockbroker after the man replied that he was a stockbroker. The man's name was Bob Bridges, and he gave Gardner an introduction to the world of finance, which led to an internship at a major stock brokerage firm. Gardner would eventually become as wealthy as the man with the Ferrari who inspired him to become a stockbroker. This is emphasized by the fact that he purchased a Ferrari himself after becoming a millionaire. Not just any Ferrari either. He actually purchased a Ferrari Testarossa that belonged to none other than Michael Jordan. The license plate on his black Ferrari read, "Not MJ," as he drove around Illinois. Number 5. It was, for the most part, received well by critics. Granted, the performance of Will Smith and his son Jaden lifted the movie to extreme heights. Regardless of this, the movie was sometimes reviewed as being a bit too corny. One reporter of the LA Times wrote, "Though the subject matter is serious, the film itself is rather slight, and it relies on the actor to give it any energy. Apart from a few negative reviews like that one, the general reaction has been positive, as evidenced by a fairly high score of 8 out of 10 on the most popular movie database, IMDb, after nearly 500,000 votes."